Thank you.
So, Dr. Jadeja?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, please, you please take over now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So, all the participants, since we are already running behind the schedule and our next speaker is already online, so we'll start with this session, okay, without having any break in between. Okay. So, our next speaker, I will introduce Dr. Shastri.
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Yes,
Am I audible?
yes, sir. It's fine. I'm
Okay,
introducing you.
Yes,
okay,
you're audible.
yeah.
Okay. So I will introduce our speaker. We are fortunate enough to have Dr. Yogendra Sastry with us for this session on LCA. So Dr. Yogendra Sastry is an associate professor in the Department of Chemical Engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. He did his BTech in Chemical Engineering from the prestigious LIT Nagpur, MTech in Systems and Control Engineering from IIT Bombay, and a PhD in Bioengineering from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Subsequently, he was a postdoctoral research associate at the Energy Biosciences Institute at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. His research work focuses on developing and applying systems theory-based tools for sustainable development, and specific areas of interest include biomass to energy systems, life cycle assessment, supply chain design, municipal solid waste management, and system dynamics. He also teaches a course on sustainable engineering at IIT Bombay, and recently we came to know that this course is now being beamed on Swayam Prabha DTH channel number 16. So it will be really helpful at this juncture. And he has, to his credit, over 60 publications in peer-reviewed journals, 5 book chapters, and 1 edited book to his credit. So we are fortunate enough. We welcome you, sir, for this session, and I welcome you all. I welcome you on the behalf of all the coordinators of this FPC and participants. I would like to inform the participants that this life cycle assessment is very important topic. It's an indispensable tool when we are thinking of switching over from linear economy to circular economy. And so we have 2 sessions on this. So the first will cycle assessment, which will give you an idea about the concept, what is and what is the methodology of LCA. We will talk about some case so that LCA. So welcome, sir. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Jadeja and his co-organizers for giving me this opportunity to give this talk on life cycle assessment. So as he has said, there are 2 talks planned for today with lunch break in between. And so let me just briefly introduce my background. I mean, Dr. Jadeja has already explained a little bit, but I mainly work in the area of biomass to energy systems, and LCA or life cycle assessment is a very useful and very popular tool now to really understand how sustainable your systems are. So I will present the methodology in the first session and 2 examples in the second session. I also want to begin with, I want to just encourage you to keep this session interactive, because normally when I'm conducting this session or when I'm teaching this topic in classroom, I generally have a lot of question answers. So unfortunately, given the situations, we cannot be face to face, but I would still try to keep it interactive. I would encourage you to, if I ask questions, I would encourage you to write your answer in the chat box. I will keep a track of what answers people are giving, and based on that, I will change my explanation if needed. So I request you to please be interactive in the session. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I hope you are able to see my screen. So as I said, the first topic is on, first session is going to be on life cycle assessment, and I'll talk more about the concept and the methodology. Now, I want to, before I jump into life cycle assessment, I want to explain where does it fit in the larger scheme of things. So this whole concept of life cycle assessment is actually one aspect of the much broader topic of sustainability. And even the previous speaker, I attended last few minutes of the lecture, I understood that she was talking about mud and bamboo based housing, which is expected to be more sustainable as compared to conventional concrete and steel housing. So the whole concept of sustainability is about preserving nature, and this is the, whatever you see on this slide is a formal definition of sustainability that was proposed in 1987. This was a commission set up by United Nations, and it says that it's the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation. So basically what it says that whatever we do, in terms of resource consumption, waste generation, and so on, it should be such that we meet our own needs, but we also don't compromise the future generation, like our kids and grandkids and so on. So, we should conserve resources. We should not use beyond what nature can produce and all these things. So this is a broad concept of sustainability. And of course, this is a very generic, very broad definition. When we go to sustainable engineering, there are more specific definitions. But that is not the focus of this talk. But what I want to emphasize here is that sustainability has three dimensions. One is environment. Of course, we talk about resource conservation, environmental protection, protection of species, and so on. But a lot of times people consume sustainability with environmental protection, and that is not correct. Sustainability is about environmental protection as well as economic feasibility and societal acceptance. So only if you have something that is at the intersection of all these three, then only you can call it sustainable. So again, going back to the previous session, I expect, although I have not done the calculation, I expect a house made up of bamboo and mud to be much more environmentally friendly, as the speaker was saying. But that doesn't mean that it is sustainable. It has to be economical, it has to be reasonably cheap to build, and it has to be acceptable to the society. Someone who is going to live in that house has to accept that. Otherwise it is not sustainable. So that is something I want to clarify at the beginning itself, that sustainability is not only about environmental protection. Now, given this very brief background of what is sustainability, let me talk about where the concept of life cycle assessment fits in. So there are two aspects to sustainable development. One is, you come up with new methods of reducing the environmental impact or making things sustainable. Topics like green chemistry and engineering. If you are from chemistry or chemical engineering or environmental engineering, I'm sure you have heard of these terms before. Things like process integration, again, more chemical engineering specific. But these are basically things that we do to reduce the environmental impact and therefore make a step towards sustainability. More in terms of more engineering or management, there are things like industrial ecology, where you use waste from one industry as a resource and so on. Or circular economy, where you recycle material as much as possible. So these are things or actions or technologies that we use to improve the design and reduce the environmental impact. But at the same time, you need to have an assessment of how bad or good your solution is. Let's say you have come up with a mud and bamboo house. Now, yes, you expect it to be sustainable, you expect it to be environmentally better, but by how much? Is it better by 5%? It is better by 50%? And that makes an important difference. And if you have multiple options to compare, if you have 5 different options to choose from, you need rigorous assessment methods. You need rigorous quantification methods that can tell you that, okay, this is the impact of option A, this is the impact of option B, this is the impact of option C. and then you can make the right choice. Otherwise, the discussion is not very useful and you cannot really make decisions. And as engineers, our job is to design things and take decisions. And it's almost impossible to do that without some quantification. So that is where the concept of sustainability quantification comes in. And life cycle assessment is one of the methods. Okay. There are other methods also. So this LCA is not by any means the only method available for sustainability assessment. Unfortunately, no method is the best one. There are advantages, limitations, and so on. So the simplest kind of methods of assessment are indicators and indices. So you might have heard of global warming potential, water footprint, carbon footprint. So these are typically considered as indicators because they tell you about a specific aspect of the system. LCA has a much broader scope. So you can say in some sense that indicators are a subset of LCA, and we will see that a little later in the session. But LCA has a much broader scope. The concept of life cycle, which is part of the title, is very important here. It considers the complete life cycle of a product. So that's why it is classified as product-related assessment. And then there are other methods like system dynamics, agent-based modeling, which are more relevant for policy and regulatory issues. And I'll not discuss those in detail at all. I'll focus on this session is going to focus on LCA, which is, as I've already mentioned, it has become a very popular method. Many of the big companies, when they come up with their new product now, they are actually doing life cycle assessment of their products to actually quantify how much benefit have they gained. If they have made some changes, let's say in the supply chain or in the process, what is actually the benefit? Also, increasingly, I have seen that even research is actually, even funding organizations are actually asking for LCA-based studies for any new process or product that you develop. So as Dr. Jadeja also said at the beginning, it has become a very important tool now. So this is going to be the outline of my talk, first talk, where I'll give you some examples. We'll have a discussion on through some examples of why LCA is important. How does it differ from conventional environmental impact assessment? Then I will go into the methodology part. This is where I'll spend most of my time on the different aspects of LCA methodology. And then I'll conclude my talk by highlighting some limitations, some additional and upcoming topics in the area of LCA, and also provide you some resources that are available if you want to learn more. So when I teach this in my course, I take almost 4 weeks to cover this topic. So I'm condensing all of that into 1.5 to 1.5 hours or so. So this is going to be very superficial in that sense, but it will be a good introduction, hopefully. Okay, so let me start with the actual topic of LCA. Given this background, I hope you have sort of understood where LCA fits into the larger scheme of things. Let us start with the discussion first. So let me ask you a question here. Okay, so let's say you have, now I'm assuming that all of you are attending this course. So I'm assuming that all of you are concerned about the environment and you want to reduce pollution, waste generation, and so on. Let's say you have two options. You have an option of electric car versus a conventional petrol car. And I ask you to select a car which is environmentally friendly. And for the sake of simplicity, ignore everything else, like the cost of the vehicle, the performance, the pickup, mileage, and everything. Just forget all about that. Let us say you have two options, electric car versus conventional petrol car. Which one would you choose as something that is environmentally friendly in your opinion? So let me go to the chat window. You can type your answer in the chat window. Okay, so there are so most of you seem to be preferring the electric car, although there are a couple of answers on conventional car. Okay. So, okay, so one of the participants has said source of electricity for that car also matters. I guess that's what you that was the intention. So there seems to be a rough guess is about 65% of you would prefer an electric car. The rest would prefer a conventional car. So what is the point of contention here? Because if you look at the tailpipe emissions, let me go back to the slide. If you look at the performance, the tailpipe, when I'm actually driving the car, there is no question that electric car is better because there are no emissions. In the conventional car, you are burning petrol or diesel, so there is something coming out of the tailpipe. There are CO2, carbon monoxide, SOx emissions and NOx emissions and all those things. Electric car is a very clean operating car at least. But that is only part of the picture. So as one of the responses that was mentioned, it really depends on what is the source of your electricity. Because electric car doesn't have any emissions, that's fine, but it doesn't mean that there is no energy required. It still requires energy. So when you charge an electric vehicle, the energy is coming from electricity. And whether the emissions are lower or higher than the conventional car will really depend on the source of the electricity. So if your electricity is produced by burning coal, which is the case in India, almost 60% of your electricity is coming from coal. So it is quite possible, and some studies have actually shown this, that it is possible that electric car is actually it has greater greenhouse gas emission as compared to conventional petrol car. Just because your electricity is coming from coal, which is a very dirty fuel. Power plants, coal burning power plants have a very high GHG emission. So what has happened here is the location of the impact has changed. It is not, when you are talking about an electric car, it is not the driving which is causing the emission. It's actually the production of electricity which is actually causing the emission. So if you take a very narrow view of only the operation of a car, you will get a misleading picture. You will conclude that electric cars are always better, but that is not the case. So if you change your electricity source to natural gas or solar or hydro, of course, it is almost certain that your electric car will be better. The other thing that I would just very briefly mention is the batteries. Electric cars need batteries. Battery life currently is about 5 to 7 years. What happens when batteries are disposed of? It's going to be a pollution problem. So all these aspects need to be considered. Let me go to a second example about something that is very relevant in the Indian context right now. Because a couple of years ago, there was this ban on plastic bags, single-use plastic bag. So I will ask you the question again. Do you agree with the ban? Would you switch from plastic to paper, or do you think plastic is better? Let me again go back to the chat window. Just I want to know your preference. Or okay, cloth one. Okay, cloth one is definitely better, but let's leave that aside for the moment. So paper is obtained by cutting tree. That is important. A lot of timber goes in paper. Plastic should be banned. Okay. Recycle paper. Okay, that is always better. Okay. Source of paper is important. Great. So so there is it's not so clear what is the dominating preference, but it seems that some of you prefer recycled paper, especially some of you also want plastic to be recycled. But the ban is there, right? So single-use plastic is banned. We are forced to use paper or cloth, preferably. So let's see whether that really makes that's a correct decision. So I will again go back to the slides. So I'll show you some numbers, okay? So this is based on literature. I've given the source at the bottom, and I will share the slides later. This is a comparison in terms of cost and environmental impact. And this is only talking about the production and some disposal aspects. So cost-wise, plastic bag is better. In the interest of time, I couldn't actually find India-specific numbers, but they may not be very different. So plastic bags are cheaper. If you look at waste generation, so this is during the production of plastic bags, and all these numbers are for 150 million bags that are produced. So this is about a disposal phase. So plastic bags generate about 4,600 tons of CO2. Paper bags, depending on composted or uncomposted, it differs, but it is always higher than plastic bags. Plastic bags require 70% less energy during production than paper bags. The water requirement is lower in case of plastic bag manufacturing. So if you look at these numbers, it again seems a little bit counterintuitive. You know, the message that we are getting is that plastic bags are actually much better. Paper bag manufacturing is a problem. It generates more waste. It requires more water. Some of you have mentioned it requires wood, which may lead to cutting of trees and so on. So this comparison also seems to convey a little bit. The comparison seems to be counterintuitive. That doesn't necessarily mean that plastic ban is bad, because one of the points that actually was the main reason for ban on plastic bag is what happens after it is used. After the bag is used, unfortunately, the disposal system is not very good in India. It is not very well segregated. Plastic trash is lying around. It chokes the sewage system. It chokes animals and so on. So that's an overwhelming concern. So it doesn't mean that plastic bag ban is bad. But production side, paper bag is definitely worse. Plastic bag is better. It's really the after use phase where plastic bag is really bad. So that's another interesting example. Let me come to the final example here. Okay. So I've given you 5 cups. Let's say you want to have a cup of tea or coffee, and you have 5 options in front of you. Let me explain the options. The top 3 ones are the reusable ones. Okay, glass, ceramic, and plastic. So this is, you can use multiple times after washing. The bottom 2 ones are use and throw. This is paper cup, and the white one is the styrofoam cup. Okay. Again, the same question to you. Forget about the cost and everything else. If I want you to make a decision which is good for the environment, which cup would you prefer? Again, I request you to type your answer in the chat window. Okay, recycle, glass cup, reusable, ceramic. The reusable one should be used in home. However, disposal should be in public places. Okay, because water will be saved in washing. Glass and ceramic. There's only one answer supporting reusable, sorry, use and throw ones. Everybody seems to be interested in either glass or ceramic. Okay, so so it seems that overwhelming response is in support of reusable one, and that actually is it makes sense. But let's look a little bit more into this this problem. Now, this problem was actually studied. I've given the reference at the bottom. A fairly old study, almost 20 years now. But this is basically a comparison based on the energy that is required to produce different kinds of cups. So the concept of embodied energy is how much energy goes into making a cup. Okay. So this last column is what matters. So this is megajoules per cup. So if I want to manufacture one ceramic cup, I think one of the participants is not on mute. May I request someone to mute? Okay, so it says that if I'm manufacturing one ceramic cup, it takes 14 megajoules. If I'm manufacturing one plastic cup, it takes 6.3 megajoules, and so on. So you will see again that the manufacturing aspect with paper and foam are actually very efficient because they take very little energy to manufacture. Now, the way this information is useful and why it is relevant in this particular case is, I'll explain this reuse matrix. So what this tells you is the ceramic cup requires certain amount of energy. We saw that it requires 14 megajoule per cup. And what this 39 number tells you, so this is a combination between ceramic and paper. What this tells you, if I use a ceramic cup 39 times, then only the total energy investment is comparable with respect to 39 different paper cups. Okay, because if you see, a paper cup requires much less energy, a single paper cup, as compared to a ceramic cup. So if I'm using, let's say the life of a ceramic cup, let's take a hypothetical example. A life of a ceramic cup is 25 uses, and after that it breaks. If that is the case, then it doesn't really make sense to use a ceramic cup, because it's better to use 25 use and throw paper cups, because cumulatively the energy embodied into these 25 paper cups is still going to be lower than a single ceramic cup. The situation is even worse for foam, because foam required much less energy. So you have to use a ceramic cup 1000 times before it becomes equivalent to a foam cup. So again, the reason I'm giving all these examples is because intuitively we say that, okay, we should use a reusable cup, because it lasts longer and so on. But it's not only about reusability, it's also about the life of the product. If it requires a lot of energy and resources to make that product, it is reusable. But if the number of times it can be used is very small, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is good. Maybe a use and throw option is better, because cumulatively it gives a less. Okay. So what I'm trying to convey through these 3 different examples is that oftentimes what we think is a better option is not really a better option, and that's why you need quantification, systematic quantification, and you need to look at the complete picture. That's where the word life cycle comes in. So that's basically the background of why life cycle is important, and it's important to understand this before we actually go into the methodology. So any question on this before I move ahead? Any important question? We are really short on time, but maybe I can take 1 or 2 important questions if there are any doubts. Okay, so maybe we can have questions later. So I will now explain the concept of a life cycle. So life cycle, which is also sometimes people refer to as cradle to grave, it basically looks at the complete life cycle as the word suggests. So you have material extraction, for example, material processing. Okay, so if you are producing something, let's take the example of a mobile phone. Okay, all of us have a mobile phone. So if I want to do a life cycle assessment of a mobile phone, I really need to start with the material extraction phase. So broadly speaking, a mobile phone requires metal, precious metals, because they are used in semiconductor manufacturing, which is part of the motherboard and so on. So you need to really start from the extraction phase of these metals. Similarly, you need plastic. All our mobile phones have plastic. So plastic comes currently, almost all the plastic that we use is produced from crude oil. So you need to start from crude oil extraction. So that is the material extraction phase. Then material processing. Any material needs some kind of a purification, some processing, and so on. Third is actual manufacturing. That's when the mobile phone is actually manufactured. Let's say in a Samsung or an Apple manufacturing facility. Fourth is the use phase. That's when we actually come in. We are users of mobile phones. So the use phase, that is an important phase. And finally, the waste management phase. This is something that we often forget. What happens to a mobile phone after it stops functioning? Okay, it is probably going to landfill. Maybe it goes in some kind of a dustbin or a dumping ground. Maybe some part is recycled and so on. But these are 5 main stages. Anything that you take around, anything that you see around, we can broadly say that it has 5 different phases of the life cycle. And there could be internal reuse. For example, you can say in case of a mobile phone, maybe the battery is reused or the screen is reused. Keyboard maybe is reused. There might be some remanufacturing. So you incorporate in some other product. And there could be recycle. So there could be internal cycles. But whatever you see inside of this box is what is known as a life cycle of a product. So it captures all the stages of the product, right from the material extraction, processing, manufacturing, use and waste disposal. There might be some reuse, remanufacturing and recycle. But all of that is this dashed line and gray box includes everything inside, and that is known as the life cycle or cradle to grave of a product. And what you do in life cycle assessment is basically quantify the environmental impact for this whole life cycle. All these different stages: material extraction, material processing, manufacturing, use and waste management. The objective of life cycle assessment is to quantify the environmental impact of this complete life cycle, which includes resources used. So you might use resources like forestry material, coal, water, and so on. So these could be resources used. You generate emissions. One major emission that all of us are concerned about is carbon dioxide. Global warming is a concern. But there could be a lot of other emissions: methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, a lot of chemicals are emitted and so on. And waste. Okay, you might be generating some waste, like liquid waste, solid waste. If you have a nuclear power plant, for example, there are no emissions in a nuclear plant, but the radioactive waste is a very important concern. So the objective of life cycle assessment is to quantify all these emissions and the resources used. Okay, and that's the concept of life cycle assessment. So how is life cycle assessment used? I've sort of briefly talked about it already. It is used to quantify the environmental impact of a product or a process. So let's say I'm talking about a mobile phone. I want to know what is the environmental impact of this mobile phone. I can do this complete cradle to grave study and quantify. Okay, so one mobile phone, let's say, leads to 100 kgs of CO2 emissions. But a more important use is to actually compare. As I said, we typically have to do LCA to take some decisions. Otherwise, it is not really useful. So we can compare 2 phones. Let's say a mobile phone of Samsung versus mobile phone of Apple, which is better. And then hopefully that will help users to make more informed choices. So comparing 2 or more products is one of the uses. The third important use could be to identify the hotspot. Okay, so let me take the example of this mobile phone, and I do a life cycle assessment. We will see how to do it later. But let's say the overall impact is 100 kgs of CO2 emissions. Over the complete life cycle of a mobile phone, the emission is 100 kgs of CO2. And I want to reduce it. Now, if I want to reduce that number of 100, the immediate question is, which stage should I focus on? Should I improve my manufacturing? Should I improve my use phase by, let's say, improving the battery life? Or should I improve the waste management step? What should I really improve? And that's where again the LCA becomes useful, because LCA will tell you which is the hotspot or where is the major contribution. So it is quite possible in case of a mobile phone that out of those 100 kgs, 80 kgs of emissions are coming in the use phase. and the material processing is contributing only 5 kgs. So if that is the case, if I want to reduce the environmental impact, the first target should be to improve the use phase. Sure, I can still improve the material processing phase, but it is anyway contributing only 5%. So even if I improve it significantly, the impact is not going to reduce by much. In contrast, if I improve the use phase by 10% or 20%, it's going to make a significant contribution in the overall emission. So that's what I mean by identifying hotspots. And that's actually very useful outcome of an LCA study, because it tells people who are developing a product or a process that, look, this is where most of the impact is. This is where you should focus on. If you want to improve the product or process, that's where you should focus on. So that's a very important feedback that life cycle assessment provides. So that's how that's how LCA is used. Okay. So there are different types of LCA study. It's a very vast topic, and I'm just going to. This is just through this slide. I'm explaining what different types are there. What engineers typically do is what is known as process-based LCA, and this is what I will talk about in my seminar. There is also another variant which is known as the environmentally extended input-output LCA. This is actually more relevant for people who are in economics. So this is more at the economy scale, and therefore economics or environmental economists use it. There is also a hybrid approach which is coming up, which sort of combines both these. There is also two different ways you can do LCA. One is the attributional LCA, which, let's say, if I have one mobile phone, what is the emission or the life cycle impact of this mobile phone? That's an attributional LCA. Consequential LCA is what is the change? So if I replace one Samsung phone with an Apple phone, what is the consequence of that change on the environmental impact? So my talk is going to be on process-based LCA, which is done for attributional purpose. That is going to be the focus, and for engineering purposes, that is the most relevant option. The other options are typically used by economists. Okay. Any question on this before? Now I am going to the actual methodology part of LCA, but any question? Okay, so there was a question on what is embodied energy means. So basically it's the energy that has gone into making the cup in this case. So the cup itself doesn't have, it has some energy in absolute sense, but it's not really an energy product like petrol or diesel. But in order to make that cup, some energy was used, right? Something was melted, something was heated, some steam might have been used for heating and so on. And that means some energy was consumed. So that is what we mean by embodied energy. Okay, any other question? Okay, if not, I know it's lunchtime is approaching, but let's see. I'll try to keep this more interesting. Okay, so this is actually the framework of doing life cycle assessment. So this is actually formalized as per the ISO 14000 series. There are certain guidelines that are recommended, and there are mainly 3 steps. First step is goal and scope definition. This is where you actually define what is the objective of your LCA study, what is the scope of your study. So this step is actually conceptual. You don't do any calculations at this step, but it's a very, very important step because it has implications on the results that you generate. And I'll give you a couple of examples later. The second phase is inventory analysis. That's where you actually do the calculations, inventory calculations, and you come up with numbers. And the third phase is impact assessment. That's when you convert your inventory or the emissions into impact categories like water depletion, climate change, eutrophication, and so on. Okay. And I'll tell you why this is important. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this seminar is talk about each of these steps briefly to give you an overview. So let's talk about goal and scope definition. So the objective of goal and scope definition is to explain what is the intended application of this study, especially the goal statement. should convey what is the intended application, why you are doing this study, what is the audience, who is the audience, and how it will be used. So this is an example of a goal statement for a Christmas tree. Okay, so this is coming from a paper. This was a study done by an organization in the US, where they wanted to compare the natural Christmas tree with an artificial tree. So obviously Christmas is a big festival in the US, and all the households, or almost every household, has a Christmas tree. Now, traditionally it's a natural tree which is cut from the plantation, but there are alternatives available using a plastic tree which is reusable, which you can use for multiple years. So the goal of this study was to understand the environmental impacts of the artificial Christmas tree and common natural Christmas tree, and how do they compare. So again, as I said, comparing two products. So the objective is to compare two products, and the intention is that the study will be released to the public so that they can make better choice. Okay, if someone is really concerned about the environment, they can look at this study and see which is better. So that is the goal of this study. The next very important thing is the functional unit, and from this point the discussion is very important. I would request you to listen to this very carefully, because this is where actually the LCS study starts. So the first thing that you have to decide when you are doing an LCS study is what is going to be your functional unit. And functional unit is basically the basis of comparison. So let me take an example of sulfuric acid. I mean, it could be any other process. I've just taken this example, and you don't really need to know what is sulfuric acid or how it is manufactured. The point here is, let's say you are manufacturing sulfuric acid, and you have two options. Process A, which is contact process, process B, which is lead chamber process. Again, you don't need to really know about the process. You can think about process A, process B. And I want to compare. I want to do an LCA study to compare these two processes. Which is better? I want to find out. My question to you is, on what basis should they be compared? What should be the basis of comparison? When I do the calculations, for what should I do the calculation? Again, please post your answer in the chat window. Energy and material consumption. So very quickly, this is what we are going to calculate. Okay, energy consumption or material consumption is going to be an outcome of your LCS study. My question is, for what thing should the calculation be done? Should we do it for one plant of process A versus one plant of process B? 1 kg or 1 ton? That's a very interesting answer. Quantity required to produce. Again, quantity required will be resource consumed, so it will be an outcome of your study. Energy required is again an outcome. Okay. Total cost. Okay, so one thing I want to clarify is life cycle assessment doesn't care about cost. Okay, let's forget about cost for the next 3 hours. Quantity of final product, volume and concentration. Okay, so these are very good answers. So the point here is, if I want to know which process is better, I would like the comparison to be fair, right? So let's say one answer that I typically get from students is, I will take one process plant, manufacturing plant, which is using contact process. I will get the emissions for that. I will take another plant which is using the second process, and I'll get the emissions for that, and I will compare. But that may not be a fair comparison, because it's possible that this plant is bigger. Maybe it's producing 100 kgs per day. Maybe this is producing only 10 kgs per day, or 10 tons per day, and 100 tons per day. So obviously this impact is going to be higher in absolute terms, but that doesn't mean that this process is necessarily bad. So in order to make sure that the comparison is fair, I need to compare on a consistent basis. So the basis of comparison here would be 1 kg of sulfuric acid. So I will get data for one process. I will scale everything for 1 kg of sulfuric acid. I will get data for the second process. Again, I will scale everything for 1 kg of sulfuric acid, and then I can compare, because then I know that all the impacts or emissions, whether it's CO2 emissions or fuel used or sulfur used, it's for a consistent number, which is 1 kg of sulfuric acid. In fact, that is also not sufficient. I'll also need to explicitly say the concentration, 1 kg of 100% sulfuric acid. Then only it's a fair comparison. Okay. So the functional unit here would be 1 kg of sulfuric acid. Okay. Let's take another example. Let's say I want to compare 3 cars. The 2 cars that we have previously talked about, an electric car versus a petrol car, and let's say I'm adding another option, which is a biofuel car, which uses ethanol, or let's say biodiesel. I want to do life cycle assessment to compare these 3 cars. What should be the functional unit? Again, what should be the comparison? I have 3 options. I want to do LCA. What should be the basis of comparison? Distance traveled. Okay. Any other answer? Fuel efficiency, fuel cost. Again, forget about cost. Cost doesn't matter in LCA. Production of fuels. Okay. Okay, maintenance. Again, maintenance, if you're talking in terms of cost, doesn't come into picture. Life cycle assessment doesn't consider about cost. Type of fuel. Okay. Okay, so let me ask you a question. What is this service that you are? Why do you use the car for? What is the purpose of using a car? The purpose is to drive, right? Travel, exactly. So purpose is to travel. So you want to go from point A to point B. That's why we use a car. And therefore, in fact, the first answer that was posted, distance traveled, is the right answer. That should be the basis of comparison. And in fact, a lot of points that you are mentioning here, like type of fuel, maintenance, fuel efficiency, all of that will be considered in that. And I'll explain that. Okay. So you have, and point I'm saying is the primary purpose of a car is to travel from point A to point B. So I will say, okay, my functional unit here will be 1 kilometer, or let's say 100 kilometers of distance traveled. Now, if I use a diesel fuel, let's say this is a diesel vehicle, and if I use that vehicle to drive 100 kilometers, I will need certain fuel. Let's say certain X liters of diesel I need. And when I do the LCA calculations, I will need to consider, okay, in order to manufacture those X liters of diesel, what was the life cycle impact, or what was the CO2 emission? What was the CO2 emission during the burning of that diesel? Okay, so all of those things that you mentioned, like fuel efficiency, type of fuel, is captured in that 100 kilometer functional unit. I'll do the same calculation here. I will again consider that an electric vehicle is used to drive for 100 kilometers. Now here the fuel is electricity. So in order to drive 100 kilometers, I need certain kilowatt hours of electricity. I will go to the power plant. How much energy or how much emission is there in order to produce so many kilowatt hours of electricity? Again, fuel efficiency will come in, because the number of kilowatt hours required will be a function of the efficiency of the car. Same for the fuel, same for the biofuel vehicle. So the point is here, actually, the reason this example is very interesting is because there are 3 different types of fuels. So you definitely cannot compare based on fuel. You cannot compare 1 liter of diesel versus 1 liter of 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. That is not possible. The functional unit is the service that is provided. The service is driving. In the previous example, service is 1 kg of sulfuric acid. You are using the sulfuric acid as a chemical somewhere. Doesn't matter whether it is produced from this process or this process. It's the same 1 kg of sulfuric acid. Similarly here, 100 kilometers of distance driven. That is what we are using it for. Okay. Let's go back to the third example that we talked about. Cups. Now, if I want to use LCA to compare these 5 cups, what should be the functional unit? I'll give you a hint here. What is the service that we are looking for here? Usage. Okay, can you be more specific? That's the right answer. Partly right, but what is the? Can you be more specific? Okay. So, okay. Drinking. Okay, so drinking is the purpose of the. We are using cups to drink, right? So that is the service that is being provided, and therefore a functional unit should be based on the number of drinks. So here, you can use the 100 drinks or 1000 drinks, doesn't really matter, and I'll tell you why. If I use 100 drinks as my functional unit, and so obviously these use and throw cups, you will need 100 such cups. Okay, so whatever is the emission for 1 cup, you have to multiply by that 100 times. Let us assume that the life of a glass cup is 100 uses. So the emission for manufacture of a single cup will be used. So it becomes a fair comparison, because ultimately I'm using every cup for the same number of times. If the lifetime of a glass cup is 200 uses and my functional unit is 100 uses, I will divide all the emissions by half. Okay, because in reality I can use it for 200 times. My functional unit is only 100 uses, so I will account for only half of the emissions, and I think that's a fair thing to do. Okay, this is similar to what we do in costing. Actually, you know, I assume most of you are engineers. You would have done some course on process or manufacturing economics. We have capital investment, right? So capital investment lasts for 15 to 20 years. We annualize that when we do annual costing. Operating cost is calculated on an annual basis, but your capital investment is scaled down to every year. If the life of an equipment or a product is larger, we can scale it down if needed. So the point here through these 3 examples is that functional unit is always the service that is provided. 1 kg of sulfuric acid, 100 kilometer or 1 kilometer of distance traveled, 100 uses of the cup or 100 drinks. The last example, in the interest of time, I'll directly give you the answer. Let us say we are comparing 3 different types of bulbs: LED bulb, CFL bulb, incandescent bulb. The service that we are looking forward, that's the service that we are using from this bulb, is light. You know, it's really the light that we use. Doesn't matter what type of bulb we are using. It's really the light that we are using, and therefore the functional unit will be some kind of a light measure. In this case, lumen hours. Okay, so this particular example, I've given the source at the bottom. 200 million lumen hours was the functional unit. In order to provide this much light, you need 22 incandescent bulbs, you need 3 CFL bulbs, and you need only 1 LED bulb. So you can then, it becomes a fair comparison. It is not a fair comparison if I compare 1 LED bulb versus 1 CFL bulb versus 1 incandescent bulb, because the output or the service provided is very different by each of these bulbs. Okay. So this is about functional unit. Some of the common things, and some of the responses were along similar lines. These are common mistakes. You should not compare a functional unit with the output, that like tons of CO2 or tons of CO2 per kilowatt hour. It's not an functional unit. Functional unit also has to be quantitative. You cannot say generating electricity or driving as a functional unit. You have to have a number associated with it. 1 kilowatt hour of electricity or 100 kilometers of driving. There has to be a number always with a functional unit. And it has to be consistent. Okay. So that was the first part about functional unit. Any questions about this? Let me take a half a minute break. Any question about functional unit? Okay, so let's move ahead. So once you have decided the functional unit for whatever product, no, so just to connect it with the previous lecture, if I want to do something, if I want to do an LCA and compare a conventional house with a mud and bamboo house, the functional unit would be one house of a certain floor area, certain number of stories, you know, like one storied house with a certain, let's say 1,000 square meter area with certain amenities in it. So it has to be a fair comparison. Okay, for the same lifetime also, let's say 15 years of usage and all of that. So that has to be, that's an just to connect to whatever you have already seen. So once you have now decided the functional unit, the next thing is to actually then decide what needs to be considered. You know, what should be part of my calculations, and that's what is known as a product system. So product system is actually, it explicitly explains or describes or identifies what is part of my calculation. Okay, so if some of you, I'm assuming, are chemical engineers, I'm sure you would have worked on flow sheets. Okay, if you want to produce a particular chemical or a product, you develop flow sheets. And I'm sure there is something in mechanical engineering and so on. You know, they have block diagrams that tell you a manufacturing facility, different components of a manufacturing facilities. That is an example of a product system, because it tells you, okay, it starts with some collection, some purification, maybe some cutting, maybe some drilling and all of that. The difference here is that it implements the cradle to grave approach. Typically, when you look at a flow sheet or a manufacturing facility, we are only focused on what is happening in the plant boundary. Here, you expand that horizon and include everything from cradle to grave. Okay, that's the only difference. Otherwise, the product system conceptually is very simple. So I will again take the example of a mobile phone. Let's say my functional unit in case of a mobile phone will be one smartphone of a specific size with certain battery capacity and so on. That will be the functional unit. Now this is the product system that I have developed. So let me zoom in a little bit. I will let me see if I can zoom in. So the mobile phone itself, you have manufacturing phase, right? Now manufacturing of mobile requires primarily 5 things. You need a circuit board. You need actually 4 things. You need circuit board. You need LC display, liquid crystal display. You need a battery, and you need plastic for packaging. And there might be other components also. I'm just focusing on 4 main things for the sake of simplicity. So what we do in product system development, and as per the life cycle perspective, is you have to go back into the life cycle of a circuit board manufacturing. So, okay, mobile phone requires a circuit board. Now, what is required to manufacture a circuit board? To manufacture a circuit board, you require, again, I'm focusing on main inputs. You require a transistor, you require diodes, and you require resistors. So these are the 3 main components that go into circuit board manufacturing. Now, what is required to manufacture a transistor? Transistor manufacturing will require something else, right? And I'll expand on one aspect, which is diode manufacturing. Now, diode requires silicon and gallium. So I need to consider silicon production also. I need to consider gallium production also, because those feed into the diode manufacturing step. Silicon manufacturing or silicon production requires quartz. So I need to consider quartz mining, right? So this is what we mean by cradle, you know, because, okay, we need a mobile phone requires circuit board requires diode requires silicon requires quartz. So you go back into the life cycle. So this is the material extraction phase. This is the material processing phase. This is the actual manufacturing phase. Just going back to the picture that I have shown. And I can do something similar for all the other things. In fact, I would say this is simplified. You would have many more steps. The liquid crystal manufacturing will require liquid crystal production. You need a polarizer. For liquid crystal, you need some material recovery and so on. Similarly, for battery manufacturing, you require lithium, you require graphite and all these things. Okay. So this is when you develop a product system, you have to really start getting into the details without any approximation. Just identify each and every step, each and every input that is required to manufacture that product, and subsequently the use and disposal phase. Okay. And similarly, plastic packaging requires polymer. Polymer is coming from refinery. Refinery requires crude oil. Crude oil requires exploration. So you keep going backwards. So this is about the manufacturing. You will have to do something similar for the use phase. Okay, use phase, primarily in case of use phase, when you are using a mobile phone, you will require electricity for charging. And there might be periodic replacement of parts. Your battery might be replaced, your screen might be replaced, and so on. And finally, the disposal phase. Okay, disposal, again, this is a very important phase. A lot of times we ignore it, but that needs to be considered. Now, let me explain a challenge. Okay, here. Two problems here. One is crude oil exploration will require some equipment. Right? If crude oil exploration, whether it's offshore or onshore, will need some equipment. Now, let us assume that the equipment is manufactured from steel. So as per the life cycle philosophy, you have to consider steel manufacturing also. Now, steel manufacturing will require some iron ore mining, or iron is an input for steel manufacturing. So you'll need to consider iron ore mining as for your life cycle study. Now, iron ore mining itself will require some equipment, right? Mining cannot happen as without any inputs. It will require some equipment. That equipment again will require some steel manufacturing. So you will keep looping in this cycle, like, and there is no end to it, right? You can just keep going backward and backward. Similarly, all these arrows that you see are basically transportation operations. I am transporting mobile phone from the manufacturing facility to the retail shop where the user buys it. That happens using some transport, let's say in truck. So as per the life cycle philosophy, I of course need to consider the fuel for transport, but I also need to consider the emissions because of truck manufacturing. If I want to do that, I need to consider the tire manufacturing. Truck also will require some steel. So steel manufacturing has to be considered. Rubber manufacturing has to be considered. So the point I'm getting to is, when you start developing a product system, and if you want to be really comprehensive, it is going to be very difficult. There is no end to it. You just keep going backwards and backwards and backwards, and the product system will never end. And that's a big problem with the product system development phase. That, first of all, you may not have information available. You may not have any data available for tire manufacturing or iron ore mining and so on. Secondly, calculation wise, it becomes very difficult to do. So that's where that's the relevance of a system boundary. That's where the concept of system boundary comes in, where you say that, okay, I'm going to stop at some point. This cannot be, theoretically speaking, you cannot have an LCA study that is completely comprehensive. It is impossible. You have to stop at some point. And where you stop is your system boundary. Okay, so your system boundary will clearly say that this is part of my calculation. Whatever is outside of the system boundary is ignored for whatever reasons. It could be either data is not available or it is just too complicated. You cannot do the calculations. Okay. Now, the question obviously is, what is the correct system boundary? There is no right answer, because the right answer really is as large as possible. Larger system boundary means your study is more comprehensive. But other than that, it's a little bit of a subjective decision. And there is no right or wrong answer. What I typically recommend is, whatever assumption you are making, just make sure that you acknowledge it and explicitly state it, that this is my system boundary, so there is no ambiguity in your answers. Okay. These are a couple of examples. So this is from a study that we had done for biofuel production. So it clearly tells you what is part of my calculation. So it tells you that I'm considering sugarcane farming. Sugarcane farming requires fertilizer. I'm considering fertilizer production as part of my calculation because it is inside the box. Transportation operation requires diesel production, which is considered, but I am not considering crude oil extraction because it is outside the boundary, because I didn't have data. I only had data for the refinery phase. So I have ignored this, and that is fine as long as you acknowledge and clearly explicitly say that is fine. Okay, and everything else that you see in the box is part of the calculation. So that is the concept of a system boundary. I will skip this because this is part of the case study that I present later in the second session. So I will skip this. Okay. Why system boundary is important? Actually, let me say that you will often see that two different studies have done LCA calculation of the same product, but they have come up with different numbers. And these numbers could be very different in some cases. And almost always the reason is because the system boundary is different. So someone has considered some mining phase, someone has ignored it. And therefore the results are different. Someone has considered electricity production, someone has not considered electricity production. Again, the results are different. So that's why I say that whatever you use, make sure that your system boundary is clearly defined. Also, as a user, or if you are using some LCS number in your calculation, don't just blindly use the number. Make sure you have really understood what is the system boundary. Don't just take any number from literature or from internet without really understanding these details. Okay. And the one famous example, which is from biofuels, is related to system boundary controversy. So there have been a lot of studies which do LCA calculation for biofuel, and they say, okay, 1 liter of ethanol gives you so many liters, so many kgs of CO2. Now, one study that came out in 2008 claimed that is actually misleading, because what is happening is, this is a conventional cropping system in agriculture. So you have crop X, Y, and Z that are being cultivated, and there are some forest land that are being used. Now, because biofuel is being produced, you are converting crop X into biofuel crop. So that crop X is moving somewhere else. Now, because crop X has taken place of crop Y is moving to some other land. Now, because crop Y also has to be grown, it is moving to some other land, and that is actually a forest land. So you are actually converting forest land into agriculture. And that is a very bad thing to do from carbon perspective. Okay, forest lands are large repositories of carbon. So whenever you convert forest into agriculture, it leads to a lot of CO2 emissions. So the point is, this paper made was that when you are doing life cycle assessment calculation for biofuels, you really need to consider their indirect impact. And this is basically the issue of system boundary. Here, when I consider all these indirect changes, I'm essentially expanding my system boundary to consider what happens to forest land because of the decision to grow biofuel crop in my farm. So this is one example, and there are several other examples. You can have different system boundaries. A lot of studies are cradle to grave, which include the use and disposal phase also. But there are some studies which are also done from a cradle to gate perspective. Okay, so you only look at the production phase and the upstream. You don't really look at use phase. Okay, my suggestion is, whatever you decide, make sure you are clear about it. Okay, so that was the second topic of system boundary. Any questions on this? Okay, so one question is, given that system boundary will differ for an electric car and conventional vehicle, can we really compare? But my answer to that is, your LCA study should ensure that your system boundary is same. So in case of a conventional car, you should include the production of diesel, the extraction of crude oil, so that you are considering the complete cradle to the use phase of the car, okay, and also the disposal, and for an electric vehicle, you should consider the electricity production. If the electricity is coming from coal base, you should consider the mining of the coal and so on. So it's your job to make sure that your system boundary is same as an LCA practitioner. Okay. How about usage of barren lands instead of forest lands? Yeah, you can do that. So your calculation will change. Okay, your impact will probably be lower. See, my focus is not on what you do. You can grow biofuel on forest land, you can grow biofuel on agricultural land, you can grow biofuel on barren land. My focus is when you are doing LCA calculation, how you should do it. That's what I'm focusing on here.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Hello. Yeah, sir. How to decide the system boundary? Like, I want to ask that. Let's say two person are doing the LC analysis for same system. Then they may decide the system boundary according to their convenience, or is there any common platform to decide system boundary?
So, as I said, the guideline as per the ISO standard is as large as possible. Okay, but that's a very fuzzy definition, unfortunately, and unfortunately there is no standard rule. You just have to be as large as possible, but beyond that, unfortunately I don't have a more concrete answer.
Okay, thank you, sir.
If the system boundaries are different, you should be careful while comparing the results. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the second part is the inventory calculation. Okay, so this is where you actually actually I've missed some slides here. Let me just open my course and go back to that. Okay, so when you do inventory calculations, and I'll add these slides and share the analysis, share the combined slides with you. Sorry about that. But basically, once you decide the functional unit, you decide the product system, you decide the system boundary. That's when we move to the second stage, which is the inventory calculation. And as I said, that's when we do the actual calculations. Now, what is conceptually, it's actually very simple. The inventory calculation phase is very simple because you look at each of these phases and calculate the resources used and the emissions generated. So if I focus on the manufacturing phase, the manufacturing phase itself might consist of multiple stages. You may have size reduction, you may have heating, reaction, separation, storage, and all. Okay, so what you do in life cycle inventory is you calculate the resources used and the emissions generated for each of these stages and just add them together. So very simple conceptually. If you have done mass balance calculations, it's basically mass balance. Okay, so inventory for each of these phases, you will calculate, okay, it requires so much of coal, so much of water, it generates so many kgs of CO2, so many kgs of nitrous oxide, so many liters of wastewater. You do the same calculation for all these different components and add them. So when you add them together, you will get the total emission for the manufacturing phase. You do the same thing for all these different phases like material extraction, material processing, usage, and waste management, and add them together. That will give you the life cycle inventory. Okay, so conceptually it is very straightforward. As I said, it is all about mass accounting. There is a formal approach to do this, which is the matrix approach, which I'm not going to talk about. It's basically, there's a little bit of mathematics that goes into this, which you can find in textbooks. But the two major challenges which I want to talk about are, one, the biggest challenge in inventory is, first of all, your product system is too large and therefore calculation becomes difficult. The second big challenge is getting data. How do you get data? So if I'm getting electricity, let's go back to this mobile phone example. I told you that let's say I'm a mobile phone manufacturer and I want to do LCA of my product, and I'm using plastic as an input. Now, plastic, I told you, requires polymer manufacturing. It requires crude oil exploration. Now, as a mobile phone manufacturer, it is unrealistic for me to go and collect data of a plastic manufacturing facility. First of all, they may not share. Nobody wants to share data about emissions particularly. I cannot go to a, let's say, ONGC or Reliance and find out, okay, what was your emission for crude oil exploration? That is just unrealistic. So it is impossible to collect primary data for each and every component of your product system. Fortunately, there is a way around, and the solution is a database. Okay. So going back to the example that I talked about, in this example, I needed information about sulfuric acid production, ammonia production. Now it's not possible for me to talk to a sulfuric acid manufacturer. That will just use up my time. I may not get very good data. So the option in that case is to use a database. So there are commercial and free databases available, which give you this number, so that you don't have to go and get data for each and everything. You can focus on your process. So in this case, my expertise is really this biorefinery phase. I'm working on the process as a chemical engineer. For that, I have very good understanding. But I can just use the database to find out what is the emission for 1 kg of sulfuric acid, what is the emission for 1 kg of ammonia production. I can use that number from the database. And that simplifies things quite a bit. So fortunately, there are databases available. Many of them are commercial databases like EcoInvent, Gabi, and SimaPro. Many of those are free as well. So it really depends on what is your purpose. If possible, you can use free. Otherwise, you can use a paid database. Typically, most of the studies that you see will use some combination of experimental work, some published literature, some database numbers, and so on. Okay. These are some of the free databases that are available. And actually, in the second session, I will very briefly show you the EcoInvent database. Okay. I just want you to know how the database actually looks. If some of you want to actually use the use LCA, do LCA. Okay. So this I will cover in the second session. Let me go back to my original slide. How much time do we have? I understand that we are already behind schedule. I will need another 10 minutes or so. Will that be okay?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. So as I said, you do inventory calculation where you calculate the impacts or the emissions or resources consumed at each stage, and you sum them together. Okay. Now that gives you an inventory. So that gives you the emissions actually. So you might say that, okay, I have already got my number, right? The whole idea of doing life cycle assessment was to calculate the environmental impact and the emissions. So I've got my emissions. Unfortunately, you get a lot of numbers that you cannot really use. Okay. Or I should rephrase that are not very helpful to make decisions. And I'll explain why. So this is an example of the study that I will present in the second session, which is life cycle assessment of municipal solid waste. So we did an LCA calculation and we did the inventory calculation. After the inventory calculation was done, this is actually the list of all the emissions that were there for management. If I'm burning 1 ton of municipal solid waste, these are all the emissions that I'm getting. Now my question to you is, what can you interpret from this? Is it good or bad? Is it really easy to interpret? You have I'll tell you that, okay, it generates 3.61 kgs of HCl, it gives 0.9 kgs of benzene, it generates some NOx, some mercury, some PCBs. So the point is, you are getting a lot of numbers when you do the inventory calculations. This is a screenshot from EcoInvent database for electricity production. So 1 kilowatt hour of electricity production, what are the emissions that are generated? And you will see that it's a very long list. I'm just showing a small screenshot from this bar here. You will see that it's a very long list. Many of these numbers are in trace quantities, -13, -12 kg. So calculation numbers which interpret. Really come up with some kind of indicators. Okay, so that's the relevance of the third stage, which is impact assessment. So inventory stage gives you a lot of numbers which you cannot really make sense of. In impact calculation, you convert those into some kind of an impact category. Okay, and these are the impact categories that are typically considered in LCA studies. There are impact assessment models. The software actually have these inbuilt. Some of these impact categories we are very familiar with, like climate change, which is focusing on GHG emission, water depletion, which gives you water consumption. Ecotoxicity tells you how much is the toxicity because of a pollutant. Eutrophication, I'm sure all of you have heard of. Eutrophication is basically that causes the algal blooms and so on. It's related to nutrient addition to water. Ozone depletion is again something that is very commonly considered. So these are the impact categories. So what we do in impact assessment phase is you have all these different inventories that you get. We convert that into selected impact categories so we can make some decisions. We can at least compare options reasonably well and compare, okay, say that okay, one is better than the other. Okay. Fortunately, here again, as a user of LCA, you don't have to do, because there are already assessment models available. Okay. So there are already models developed by researchers which do this conversion. Okay. So fortunately, as a user, you don't have to do that. Very quickly, I will explain how these models work. So they basically connect the emission, which is coming from inventory, to the effect, and that depends on the fate of the pollutant, the exposure level, and finally the effect. Okay, so this is a task in itself. There are research groups which are focusing only on developing these impact assessment models. Okay, and this is an equation. I will skip this in the interest of time, but this is an important picture. These are basically the impact categories that are typically calculated by the impact assessment models. So things like, global warming, water use, freshwater ecotoxicity, terrestrial ecotoxicity, fossil resources. These are the categories. There is also some work done on further reducing these to 3 impact categories, mainly human health, ecosystem damage, and resource availability. So these are known as endpoint indicators. Let me skip that in the interest of time and to keep this simple. But basically, this further reduces this into just 3 categories, so that it is even more easier to make decisions. Okay, I will skip this. So these are some of the popular impact assessment methods. Okay, ILCD, RESCI. Maybe some of you, if you have used LCA in the past, you are familiar with these terms. And in the second session, I will show you, some of these options that are available in the software. Again, there is no best method, unfortunately. That's why there are so many methods. So each of these methods have their advantages and limitations, and the reason is that all of these are using some kind of a model. I told you that this conversion of emission to effect is based on some kind of a mathematical model, and every model has some assumptions. So that's why these different models and therefore different impact assessment methods. Generally, whatever I have listed on this slide are the ones that are popularly used, but it doesn't mean that they are the best ones. Okay, it again is a little bit subjective. It depends on the user. Okay, so just to conclude, so I've really I've sort of summarized the important methodological aspects of LCA, but I want to just make one point that LCA is a very good method, a very important method, but it doesn't mean that it's the best or it addresses all your problems. Okay, there are certain limitations of LCA. Limitation is lack of data, and here an important issue is regional data. So if I'm using sulfuric acid in my plant, and if my sulfuric acid is coming from a facility located in Gujarat, okay, now really I should know the emissions of that particular manufacturing facility, but unfortunately those kind of specific regional data are not available. The data availability is very good for Europe and US, but for India, the data availability is a big problem. So that is one problem. Again, data issue, inconsistent boundary selection. I have already told you there is no standard rule. So it really depends on the user or the practitioner. There is lack of single universal method. There are guidelines developed by ICO, but there is no ISO, but there is no strict rules. The other thing is it cannot capture dynamics. So time is ignored. It's like a product or a process, and you do an fact. That is a different question. If I do LCA of a mobile phone, if my result is 100 kgs of CO2 in the lifetime of a mobile phone, whether that is good or bad, you have no idea. That's a different question that you have to answer. So that is not part of LCA. LCA only gives you a number. Whether that is sustainable or not is a different question, and that is important to understand. Okay, so some additional topics that I have not covered is impact allocation. Oftentimes you have multiple products coming out. So how do you divide the impacts? I have already mentioned that there is a mathematics behind LCA inventory calculation. Consequential LCA I have already mentioned. Dynamic LCA, there is some work being done on this in this domain. So these are the resources that are available. If you want to know more, software tools that are available are OpenLCA, SIMAPro, and Gabby. OpenLCA is open source and therefore free. Databases, these are some of the popular databases that are available. If you are really interested in the theory and methodology, there is a free textbook available on internet. So if you just type LCA textbook free in Google, you will get this link. It's a free downloadable textbook on LCA, which is very good. There are other books also which are not available in open domain. This was already mentioned, so I will skip this. So, okay, this was my final slide. If you have any questions, I know we have already used up 1.5 hours, and there is a second session to come. All of us are probably hungry also, but let's open this up for questions. Maybe 1 or 2 questions. I'll hand it over to the organizers. They can decide how many questions. Any questions? So all of you will have lunch now, right? So do you have any guess of how much water we consume in lunch, or in, let's say, in one particular day? How much all the food that we eat? What is the life cycle water consumption? Any guess? Since nobody asked a question, I asked you a question, so you have to answer now. Okay, 1 liter. I'm talking about life cycle water. Okay, just think about it. No, I'm not asking about water that you're drinking or using in cooking. 3 to 5 liters, 3 liters, 2,000 liters. See, it's an outlier. Any other question? Sorry, any other number? About 500 liters. Okay. So let me give you an answer. Actually, the answer 2000 is fairly close. It's about 2 to 3,000 liters per day. So if you consider breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you take typical meals that Indians eat, it's about 2 to 3,000 liters per day. Of course, that's not the water that we drink. It's the water that goes into processing of the food, growing of crops, the whole life cycle perspective that I'm talking about. You know, if you're doing life cycle assessment of a food product, you need to consider the agricultural phase, and agriculture is a very water intensive step. Almost 80% of water that humanity uses is for agriculture. Okay. What is the water consumption Okay, let me ask you, if you are using 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, what is the GHG emission? Any guess? Just, of course, you cannot be very accurate. I don't expect you to be, but just a guess. 1 kg of 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. What do you think is the life cycle CO2 emission? So it's about 1 to 1.2 kgs in India. In Indian context, given the energy grid that we have with 60% carbon, coal, and so on, it's about 1 to 1.2. Okay. So there was one question: is LCA same as environmental impact assessment done for projects like dams? No. So environmental impact assessment is a much narrower. It has a much narrower focus. So if you are setting up an industry, you need to do environmental impact assessment and get clearances. But whatever is done in that stage is only whatever is happening in the boundary of the plant. Okay, so it only takes care. It only considers the waste that you are discharging. Where are you going to put your solid waste? What is coming out of your chimney and so on. So it's only looking at the manufacturing facility. LCA has a much broader scope. So you can say that environmental impact assessment or EIA is a subset of LCA. Yeah, so what you are saying is partly correct. LCA will include EIA. Okay, any other question? Okay, so it was one question: will LCA for recyclable products be different from conventional products? That's actually a very good question. Different in a sense that if you are using recycle, your material extraction and probably the material processing stage will not need to be considered. So if I go back to the block diagram, not this one. So if I go back to this diagram, if you have a recycled product, then it's quite possible that these two stages will have zero impact because your material is completely recycled. Okay, but that's not. Let me just correct myself. When you are recycling, let's say you are recycling paper, for example. Okay, so your waste, whatever is used, your waste paper, you are recycling it and manufacturing paper again. So your emissions related to the wood extraction and wood processing will obviously be zero, but the manufacturing process itself will require some chemicals and some electricity and so on. So those impacts will still be there because when you are recycling, the recycling operation itself takes some inputs. So those impacts will have to be considered. So that would be my one answer. The second answer is often that if you are recycling products, you are avoiding the impact because of waste disposal. So if I'm recycling paper, you get some benefit because the disposal related emissions will go down. Okay. So those will be the two differences if you are doing LCA of a conventional product versus LCA, those will be the two differences. Okay. How do we overcome the problem of data quality in LCA? The best approach is to validate it as much as possible. Okay, so if you are getting some data from the database, generally these are all the commercial databases will not publish data until they are validated. Okay, so you can trust the databases without any problem. But otherwise, the best way to look at data to overcome the data quality issue is to do some kind of validation, maybe through some visit a facility, just cross check whether the number is similar or not. That's the answer.
Dr. Shastri,
Yes.
yeah, of remaining questions we can take, if any, from the participant side in the next session.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, thanks very much, sir, for introducing the concept of LCA and the methodology of life cycle assessment. And we know that it's very difficult, as you told, that LCA itself is a big subject and it's very difficult to cover, though we have taken 2 sessions. So we hope that participants will get some exploration to the concept of LCA, and we probably hope that the next session is on case studies that will make the things more clear. So, sir, we are breaking for lunch, and I hope we will meet by 2:30, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you
Fine.
don't,
Yeah.
is it okay with you, sir?
Yeah. Yeah. 2:30 is fine.
Okay, sir. Then we will be meeting again at 2:30.
Okay. Great. Okay. And we can have some questions later also.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so the participants, we are breaking here for lunch, and we will meet by 2:30.